Good afternoon, and welcome to the Virginia Bar Association programming on artificial intelligence. I'm Paul Fletcher. I'm the executive director of the VBA. And in the past year, the VBA has been striving to bring legal education to the legal community about artificial intelligence. This month, we're having two programs that we are calling Real Smarts on AI, providing you with information on how to make artificial intelligence make sense for your practice. We have a great program for you today. It's called AI 101. Don't be afraid, just be smart. And it'll provide an introduction to AI if you have not been using it, and some tips and other good ideas of how you can make it work. This is the first of two in March, as I said. We have another program this time next week on March 27th at noon on how to use AI to help manage your firm. If you haven't signed up for that, please do so. Both of these programs are free. This program provides 1 hour of CLE credit. The other one will not. We have today two gentlemen, Justin Ritter and Chris Sullivan of Ritter Law PLLC in Charlottesville, who are here to share their thoughts and expertise on this important subject. Gentlemen, please take it away.
Awesome. Paul, thank you. And again, I'm Justin Ritter. I'm the owner of Ritter Law PLLC. I'm also the chair of the Charlottesville Business Innovation Council. And Chris and I are also co-professors at the University of Richmond School of Law, teaching the first course of its kind, the implementation of artificial intelligence into the practice of law. It's a wordy class description, but we've had a lot of fun doing it this spring of 2024. And so, Chris, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Chris Sullivan, also work at Ritter Law PLLC. And yeah, the journey of us learning more about AI and the craze of the past year or so has been a major focus of the firm that has sort of culminated in the UR class, which has been very enjoyable, something that we've completely created from scratch, a relatively novel course, and something we're looking to do in the future, but not just in terms of educating law students. We also want to be educating active practitioners on the subject because it's just going to become more relevant in our day-to-day work as attorneys.
Great. And Sonny or Megan, I don't know how much time you think we need regarding the poll, but everyone watching this right now should have received a poll regarding questions related to your current use or knowledge of artificial intelligence. And really the purpose here is to for us to get to know the audience and essentially use this hour together to meet you where you are, so that we're not talking below or above you regarding this topic. So Megan or Sonny, what do you think? Maybe a few more minutes, or do you have any thoughts?
We have 83% of participants have responded, which is wonderful. Thank you all for doing that. So I would say another 30 seconds or so to let the last few folks reply.
Well, great. Maybe we could use that time for some filler of just kind of our experience of artificial intelligence generally from the very beginning to now. And it's been quite a whirlwind. I remember the first day that we used artificial intelligence at the firm, and kind of coming into it, it was a little flashy, and I thought, well, great, is this the next crypto? Is this the next Web3? Like, is this real or not? I believe the first thing we used, which was in January of 2023, was chat. I don't know if it was called ChatGPT 3.5 at the time, but it was ChatGPT that we used. And I think that we very quickly learned that this is not the next crypto. This is not the next Web3 or insert flashy new thing. This is a real powerful tool, and something that immediately I thought, this genie is not going back in the bottle. This is only going to get better, and we've got to understand this, and we have to implement this as fast as possible. And fast forward to today, in my opinion, and I believe Chris could corroborate me on this, it's really been a great benefit to our firm, but really to get our deliverables out the door more quickly. I can tell you that there were a few moments where there would be days, and I've been practicing now for 13 years, and I kind of I've had a good sense of workflow in the day, and I would have days using artificial intelligence where I'll get to 3 o'clock and it'll feel like it's the end of the day, just based on my prior experience of how long it takes to do something, or the expectations towards the same. And that has forever changed. And I think it's a great teaser or hope towards what I believe, towards what Chris and I both believe the future could be for the practice of law, utilizing and implementing the use of artificial intelligence in its various forms. So maybe with that soapbox, getting off the soapbox, Chris, did you have anything else generally to add?
No, it looks like the results of the poll
Great.
just came in. As a majority of is no in terms of experience of familiarity with these tools, using these tools, which was expected, and it's a novel concept. Yeah, 0% using Claude is definitely a takeaway, and something. If people don't know, Claude is another AI similar to OpenAI. It's made by a company, Anthropic, that branched off of OpenAI a few years ago. It's a competitive product. It's also freely accessible. They have a premium version, Claude.ai, for people interested. We suggest you go check it out. It's a tool that we're very much interested in and impressed with, in many cases more than ChatGPT, which is the main one that people have heard of in the news. But the results of this poll isn't really a surprise, and it can be daunting of a concept. I mean, we won't lie, when we were first encountering AI in our legal practice, it was equal parts excited, but also a little intimidated. And we asked ourselves the question that everyone is asking of, is this technology going to be replacing the work that attorneys do, either now or in the coming years? And I think that anxiety, hence the title of the CLE, I think that anxiety stems a lot just from misunderstanding of what the technology actually is, what it isn't, how it works, and how you can use it. And hopefully the CLE will help you be a little more reassured in what you can do to use this technology to just make yourself a more productive, more efficient, better attorney, rather than learn more about technology that's just going to outright replace you, which in its current state, as you'll see, is not the case. To help explain that, before we get into practical tips of using this technology, it's important to understand what this technology is. So we want to go through some definitions, maybe some hot terms that you've been hearing in the news recently. First off, of artificial intelligence. When people ask that question of what is artificial intelligence, the kind of go-to answer is, well, in the 50s, John McCarthy defined artificial intelligence as machines that can perform tasks that are characteristic of human intelligence. That's not what we're dealing with here, because that technology fitting that definition has been around for decades. It was arguably realized the moment we had our first computer print out the statement, "Hello world," in our human language. What you're thinking about there is what's called symbolic artificial intelligence. It's based on specific rule-based conditionals, inform that when it gets a certain input rather, it should perform a certain output. An everyday example of this that we use in legal practice is the Control F function. For example, let's say you're given a contract and you need to find out whether there is a governing law provision in the contract, and you want to know what state governs. So typically what we do is we do Control F, and we use defined terms of, governing law, venue, forum, until we eventually find it somewhere, buried somewhere, and we can read it. That is arguably artificial intelligence. It's performing a human function through a computer. The AI that we're facing in the past year or so with the meteoric rise of ChatGPT is a much more advanced version of AI, a term that many of you may have heard called machine learning. This is machine learning AI. The difference is that instead of having specific rules or specific inputs that are inserted into the AI, this is an AI that's developing its own patterns and learning from it, from the data that's being fed into it, so that it can then produce outputs and perform certain tasks without those explicit rules for prompting from a human. So to use that governing law contract example, machine learning would instead be, it's taught on a variety of examples of governing law clauses. It learns to associate what a governing law provision looks like, what kind of words are contained within that clause, so that you can then take a contract to it later that it's never seen before and just plainly ask it, is there a governing law provision in here? If so, what is the governing law? You don't have to worry about putting in the exact right words to find it, whether it's forum, venue, choice of law, governing law, which could take some time. You can just ask it to run its patterns and find in an instant that language and provide you a plain language output answering your question. And that kind of technology is the AIs that perform that are called large language models, or what you typically hear is the acronym LLM. The language part of LLM just refers to a specific type of machine learning called natural language processing, where those patterns that it's making is just patterns in language. It's using its data set to understand human language and then predictively output characters in a way that it thinks it would make sense to humans given the inputs that were inserted into it. The large aspect of LLM is just the fact that these models are trained on immense amounts of data, like trillions and trillions of words used to train and get that predictive output. A lot of people think the larger the data set, the better the AI is going to be, just because it has more data that it can rely on in making those patterns. And as we've learned in this past year of playing around with AI, that is not always true. What you have to understand about machine learning AI and particularly large language models is all it really is a giant guessing machine. It doesn't have any notion of fact or truth in what it's outputting, which can result in what we also may have heard recently in the news, AI hallucinations. That's essentially an output that it's predicting that is either erroneous or irrelevant. And essentially what's happening there, and a simple example that it isn't mine, it comes from a professor out of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Joe Regalia. He uses example as golf. If you were to go to an LLM and ask it who is the winner in a golf game, it may go through all its data, and in most cases, most of the resources that it has in its data set, like all the other sports, it's probably going to pick up on words or sentences that suggest that whoever has the highest score in the sport that's being played is deemed the winner. So learning from that, it will output a statement along the lines of whoever has the highest score in the golf game is the winner. We as humans in our everyday knowledge, we know that that's not true. The LLM doesn't know that. It's just relying on its data set to predict what word it should say next. And that's how you get things like hallucinations. In the legal context, we've all heard the story of the New York attorney who submitted a brief that had fake cases and fake case citations in it. That's just from the LLM, ChatGPT in that specific case, going through its data set, going through its legal sources that it has in its data set, and seeing the pattern of typically when you make a legal statement, it's followed by a name, the name, and then a bunch of numbers, F's up. So it uses that and then just predicts a logical way of how that should be said and forms a completely made up case citation. That's where hallucinations come from. So it really depends on the underlying data. You can get a problem of sort of garbage in, garbage out. You don't always know what data is being relied on in the outputs that it's given. So you run the risk of hallucinations, which leads us into the final definition, at least for now, that we want to hit on, which Justin and I see as the future of use of AI in the legal context, and perhaps all contexts, which is this term called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. A RAG is essentially the process of training an LLM on your own external data set that you provided. It's not you going to ChatGPT and having it rely solely on its black box, large amounts of data that you have no idea where it's getting its output. You're asking it an input, you're asking it a question, but you're providing, your own templates for contracts, your own case law, your own statutes, and telling it, base your output specifically on this data that I'm providing you. That gives you greater assurance that you know what data is being relied on by the LLM. You can have it focus its attention on more relevant factual data rather than just perhaps a random page that was posted on the internet and then pulled from the LLM that you can't trust. And we'll get into more about that hopefully at the end of the CLE. But that's what RAGs are in short. And like I said, I think there's a strong future for them in legal practice. So we've talked about, and the poll mentioned, some of the specific LLMs that are out there right now. Again, the big popular one is OpenAI's ChatGPT, which is based on, most recently, its GPT-4 model. You have the competitor Claude, which is currently on its Claude 3 model. And then Google recently repackaged its LLM Bard into Gemini. All of those right now in some form are freely accessible. There are premium versions that allow for more sophisticated LLMs and also greater limitations or higher limitations of what you can do with it. And there are also some publicly available RAGs out there. Couple examples of that of Lexis Plus AI and Westlaw Precision. They're using an underlying LLM, but they have a specific data set. The data that Lexis and Westlaw have is the data set that their own LLMs are relying on. So it's not just general information and data that's out there that the LLM is relying on in its output. It's specific legal focused data. So people it depends on your subscription, you may have access to those. They're also offering trials that you could play around with. But that's sort of the foundation definition of what we're grappling with. So Justin, if you want to get into the practical uses of that technology now.
Sure. And thank you, Chris. I think that was a great summary and definitional portion. So now we're going to move into the main component of this CLE, which is how to use these technologies. And we have essentially three areas that we want to discuss. And maybe before I jump in, so again, a RAG, someone has asked the question, can someone put in what RAG means again? Oh, thank you, Chris. Chris is responding to you in the chat. All right, so now for this CLE, we're going to go over three concepts for uses of AI. One is legal research, two is legal review, and three is legal drafting. And then after that, we would like to touch on a little more about what a custom GPT looks like, which is essentially a mini RAG, and then what actual RAGs look like and do. And then maybe discuss a bit on how we see the future of AI implementation into the practice of law is going to look over the next few years. So starting with the legal research, and this outlined the course materials. We're going to follow it closely, although not exactly. A lot of this is based upon our syllabus for our class at the University of Richmond. Right now, we're at our class, we're actually building a RAG with a software developer, which is pretty cool. So we're just starting that now. But we started with general prompting, and then our first topic was legal research. And I think that generally speaking, the students were a bit underwhelmed by the power of the legal research from using Claude through Anthropic as well as ChatGPT 4 through OpenAI. And I think it really ties back to Chris's main point about these AIs being predictive models. And if the questions you are asking the AI, its training doesn't have, or it's not catching what you're asking it. So if you're asking it to help you write a brief, it here being one of these general LLMs, it's almost certainly going to miss the mark. And really what you need is a RAG. So like Lexis plus AI, I think could be very beneficial, or Westlaw Precision could be very beneficial, especially for case law driven work that you need to figure out. I think it can help you negate some of the manual sifting through cases to try to understand certain issues. But one little tip here, if you are going to use general LLMs here, OpenAI or Claude, what we found is really the tighter your questions, the better, the higher the likelihood that the predictive underlying foundation of these LLMs will work for you. But if you're going to ask a question about a case and how it applies to how this case is resolved, like let's say it's a federal circuit court case or district court case, and you want to compare it to other district courts throughout the United States, I don't think that's the right place to use it. Maybe one of the RAGs of Lexis AI Plus or Westlaw Precision might be a better place for that. But again, not exhaustive. I think that one message that we would, for all three of these phases, research, review, and drafting, is trust but verify. That's what that New York attorney did not do when he filed his brief. It would be the same thing as if you had a first day paralegal or a first day associate say, hey, write this brief for me, and I've just, submit it without you, the partner or the supervising attorney, looking over that work and approving it. And so, and just to touch on it briefly, this CLE is not meant to discuss ethics, but I think a lot of the ethics discussions have been about this very issue, the competency, the quality of the work product. But again, in my opinion, I think it's respectfully a nothing burger, because it's up to us as humans to, if we're the ones ultimately responsible for the work for our client, to make sure that it is in fact accurate. And so I think that when you look at the three phases of how you can use AI, at least on the transactional side of writing documents, so maybe on motions as well, you could use it. On the research side, type questions, chain of thought prompting, maybe start with certain items and then build upon it. And we found that allows your LLM answers to be a little more intelligent than just asking it everything you want to know in one prompt. So if you've got like 4 subparts to a research question, it might be better to start with the general question, then move to the next question, then move to the next, then move to the next, and dive deeper down each time. I'm just looking at our materials here. Chris, do you have any other thoughts on specifically the legal research component?
Yeah, and I'll try to hit on Laura's question quickly in the chat. Essentially, first, on the chain of thought prompting, we're so used to the technology today of Google and other search engines, where we have been trained to think of that perfect one search query to get the results that we're looking for. And we sort of need to unlearn that skill when it comes to AI and treat these as what they are, which are chatbots, and supposed to be a conversational process. So you don't have to do everything all in one fell swoop. You can do that chain of thought prompting to iterate and go step by step, have it reason step by step. And when you finally get to the question that you're looking to have answered, that's when you want the precision to tell the GPT exactly what you're looking for. But you can do that funnel strategy of just general prompting into the precise prompt of your specific question. And when you do that, just providing as much detail as you possibly can, context to do things like control variables, avoid potential assumptions that it may be making, is an important strategy. And just really quickly on Laura's question, saying she basically had an experience where the RAG of Lexis plus AI didn't do as well on the same question as GPT-4 did. There is a bit of a trade-off there, important to hit on now, where the RAG just controls the data set. It doesn't control the actual model itself of the LLM and the actual way that the AI is programmed to do the natural language processing. I would venture to guess, and this is also based on Justin and I's experience of also using Lexis Plus AI and not being too pleased with the results all the time, is despite it having a legal focused data set, its LLM does not seem as strong as what OpenAI has. The technology appears to be superior. And quickly, like going into the RAG that we're building for the UR class, that's why we're hoping to build this RAG and test it with multiple different LLMs, GPT-4, Meta's LLM Llama, and see how well each one does. So there is a difference there, and it's a bit of a trade-off of the LLM technology itself and the underlying data.
Good question. Do we want to take Bill's question here?
I haven't read it, but if you want to, go
I'll
ahead.
just read it so everyone can hear it. I'm not clear on RAGs that Lexis uses. Can someone download their RAG and then use it in a generic AI tool, or does Lexis use their RAG in their tool? So you're really using their RAG through their tool. Bill, the answer is it's the latter. Lexis, like you're not taking your RAG and putting it into Lexis. You're using Lexis's AI that they've built. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and what I was going into of like RUR RAG communicating with OpenAI versus Llama, that's where you get into APIs that enable the RAG that we built to essentially communicate with the LLM of choice. With Lexis, it's all in-house. It's their RAG and their LLM that's interacting with each other when you use it.
So Bill had a follow-up that you can't download their RAG, which I believe that's true. You can't. You have to use it through their website.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. Thanks, Bill. So anything else about legal research, or can we move now to legal review?
And let's go. We can always circle back to it if people have specific questions on it.
Okay, so here in our class, and I think that some of our students may have questioned why they were in this class until we started to show them the power of legal review. And I think that's when light bulbs started to go off, and for us in particular. I think in the legal review, some of my favorite parts of using the AI is, number one, give me a gist of what this thing is, remove the confidential stuff, if your client's not consenting to your use of the AI and without it, and get a review and get a report back. It could be wrong. Again, you got to look out for the hallucinations. But what I love about the review is I'll say, okay, this all sounds good. What is this document missing? What else should I consider? And I think that, like, if I could advocate one piece for what I really like about the AI, is that a lot of times you're staring out into the abyss as an attorney. You don't, like, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, or you don't have exactly the right form, you might be a little intimidated. Maybe you delay a little bit, procrastinate on doing the thing, or you've got some anxiety. I know I have anxiety when I don't quite know exactly how to start something or how to think about something differently. And I think this is the first stage in legal review where you really start to see AI shine. And it really is where you can ask it questions based upon its underlying knowledge of logic and other provisions that are similar to what you're trying to create, where it can make some suggestions for you. And again, you got to watch out for the hallucinations. And, if you use Claude and you review a legal document and it makes 10 suggestions for you to consider, you might scrap 8 of them and want 2 to incorporate. But at least versus you relying on your own knowledge, you're getting something. And without going down the hall or calling another partner or attorney to ask them their opinion of this very question, you're getting it in real time. And maybe it's worth kind of blending review and research here for a moment. I remember when I first started my practice at Spinella, Owings and Shia, which is now no longer a firm, but was a long-standing firm in Henrico County. And if I didn't have an answer, I would, and Google wasn't popping up. I mean, I would go into Mickey's, I would go into Virginia Forms, I would go to many different places to try to find an answer. And maybe it's just a base knowledge. AI can really help you with that, both on the review front and on the research front, which I think is just wonderful. It feels like you can just have someone to kind of give you a gut check on what you're thinking and help you avoid going down rabbit holes that I went down, many times early in my career. So I think this could be a great tool for early stage attorneys in particular. So it looks like the engagement letter. Yeah, I think that would be a best practice. I don't think that. So the question is, are you suggesting we put in our engagement letters a clause that we will be using AI and ask clients to agree to that? Yeah, probably so. I know that's not sanctioned anywhere. Like I don't think it's been addressed specifically yet, but it is their confidential information. Like I think that if they consent to your use for their items, I think that's fair game. I would get it in writing for sure if it's not in your engagement letter. When you say feed the document, all right, great question. So someone's asking like, what's the format in which you can feed the documents? That's a great question. There's multiple ways you can feed. You can feed PDFs. Excel is not that good with Claude. It's good with OpenAI. I even do snipping tools sometimes, and I'll ask it, can you read this? And it'll say yes. Sometimes if you send it a PDF, it won't be able to read it. But if you do page recognition and you wait for it to recognize the page, once you do that and throw it in, it can read it. You can also feed hyperlinks, and that part is awesome too. Like one suggestion would be like I help create Virginia condominiums. You can give the hyperlink of the Virginia Condominium Act. I mean, you could even copy and paste the whole thing and put it in there, and it'll review the whole thing for you. And that, in a way, that's kind of like a RAG, right? Because you're forcing it to view something within a very narrow parameter, and it can help you get to an answer more quickly, which I think is pretty cool. So you can use legal. So someone's asking questions about the policies and stuff. I'd like just to be respectful of time and continue to talk about uses, but maybe that would be good for like another CLE, or I'd be happy to talk about it offline. But I just want to make sure we hit all the marks here today. So again, I guess, where was I leaving off? I was talking about just the different ways in which you can have the AIs review your materials. Chris, do you have any other thoughts on that? Am I missing anything on the review?
Yeah, the things that I would add, one in reference to Aaron's question of size limitations of documents that you can review. Each LLM has their own size limitations. You kind of have to play around with it and see. Sometimes through chain of thought prompting that we were talking about in the research section, you can break up an article and have it or break up a document and have it examine it piece by piece to avoid those size limitations. That is what we think is going to be another huge benefit of a RAG. Size limitations are better rather than the size limitations that you're limited to for a specific input for an LLM. And going back to the the question on, putting it in engagement letters. Again, this isn't an ethics CLE, but it is something that everyone is thinking about when it comes to AI, and specifically usually comes up when it comes to legal review. If you are putting in, if you're feeding an LLM documents that you're asking it then to review and ask questions on, you want to ensure that you are first removing confidential and proprietary information of your clients from that to keep up with your ethical duties, which in most cases is going into the document and physically removing them. There have been reports that, Justin was talking about the tech power of OpenAI being able to review words from just a snippet or an image. There have been reports that OpenAI can also see through blacked out text that you use, like the PDF function of redactions, that it can actually unredact and see what's underneath there. So actually physically deleting and inserting with placeholders, we find is safest best practice.
Yeah, that's what
yeah, and if you can get in an engagement letter or something like the client's consent, like we've talked about, to use these models, because the model is constantly learning, and it's including inputs that you give it. It is storing that data and learning from it. So you do definitely want to make sure to keep up with your duties of confidentiality and duties of communication, that you're letting the client know exactly how the legal representation will be happening.
Yeah. One other piece that's worth noting that we haven't touched on yet is that there are public loops and private loops of artificial intelligence. Like there are some which is Azure, which I believe is Microsoft's LLM. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I know that they offer a private loop software where the idea is that you can run through your client's information, similar to how we store our client. Like a lot of us store our client's information on the cloud, right? Like it's stored at another place, like in the data center, like in Microsoft. I think it's something tantamount to that for the private loop, but for the public loop, I do think you need, and it can stink too, because then you got to spend the time to take out information, which takes more time than just throwing it in. But I do think that's the best practice, is to just take out proprietary info, and then add it back in manually once you have a completed product. But for review, since you're not drafting, it's really just taking it out and just getting logic, getting reports, etc. Okay, so again, we only have about 20 minutes left. We're getting a lot of questions. I appreciate it. I'd like to kind of pick and choose questions just to make sure that we get to the end. All right, so we've discussed legal reviews with AI. Chris, do you have any other thoughts on review before we move to drafting?
No, we can circle back if time allows, but yeah, let's keep moving.
Okay, so drafting. I think this is where AI can really shine, and I think it can shine when it comes to the logic and the staring into the abyss question. And in the last 2 days, I've made documents from scratch, which used to be an intimidating thing, looking at a white piece of paper, and creating a product where I had to kind of unlearn some things. And again, like I'm not sharing client information. I'm just saying company A, company B, and I'm just saying these are the terms. Run with it. You look at it, and then I'll say that looks good. And like, so stream of consciousness with drafting is, I know the core terms. Someone wants the things I did in the past 2 days. And I know the core terms that they want. I throw that in there, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, what, add this, and then I'll even ask the thing, what am I missing? Again, the staring into the abyss question. I'll get, and I used Claude, which is what I really enjoyed this exercise yesterday and the day prior. You look at it, and there are things that it suggested that I thought, yeah, that makes sense, and I put it in, and that was awesome. And every time I do it, it creates a new draft. And so I'm looking at it every time. And so I think that what's interesting as a an American version of a solicitor. Like we don't go to court. So, we're drafting legal documents. It's kind of a path of least resistance for us. And what I mean by that is, like manually drafting, you kind of want to hit the bare essentials. You don't want to like add a whole bunch of things and to keep the cost down, but just get to the bare essentials. Here, I just keep asking Claude to beef it up, add certain provisions, remove provisions, move them around, let it move it around. My favorite part is when I say, hey, what is this missing? What should I consider? My client has this leverage in this situation. This is what they're concerned about. Like I'm even giving those like suggestions. And then it yesterday, for example, it gave me 10 items to consider, and I picked maybe 3. And I said, I want 2, 7, and 9. Their suggestions. Show me the language that you would propose for this, and also put it where you think appropriate within the agreement. And it did it. This was Claude. And then I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, this looks good. I'm making some final tweaks to it, like within Claude, like adding certain provisions. Like I saw, for example, in the counterpart signature section within miscellaneous that didn't have an electronic signature acknowledgement and consent. So I said, hey, can you add this to it? And just did it. Took that, copied it, put it into a Word file. Once it was in a Word file on my, on our stored share file with Microsoft, I put in the party names and created the final work product for my client. And I know that was much faster than me doing it the way that I used to, which is just every single word I've typed. For standalone, these both were like 3 or 4 page documents. Not great templates to run from. So that's where I think AI really shines, is in the drafting, but in the logic of drafting, I think it can really shine. Chris, do you have any other thoughts to that part, the drafting?
Just an overall thought that I think is important to bring up here, that you were kind of hitting on already, Justin. I think they're most applicable in legal drafting and legal review. When you're thinking of that question that's looming over everyone of, are we being replaced by AI, and what AI is capable of doing? What we've learned and what you will learn in using AI, specifically if I think for legal review and legal drafting, is the things that are being replaced, the lawyer actions that are being replaced by AI are the mundane, time wasting tasks that you yourself don't want to be doing anyway. So in helping with drafting or helping of reviewing, just asking questions like, are all capitalized terms, do they have a definition in here? Do all internal cross-references in this contract make sense? I need to, I have an operating agreement that is a sole manager. Suddenly it's a board of manager. I need to change every time manager appears to managers. Do I want to spend all the time, and does my client want to pay for my time in going through, sifting through the document, making that mundane change every time? Or would everyone be happier if I'm just able to use this technology to do it in an instant? Instead, I think would leave everyone happier. It will allow you to have the brain capacity to do more complex legal work that you enjoy doing and that the client values.
Yeah.
So that I think should reassure people when they're thinking about replacement of the human touch will always be there to be needed. You'll always have to trust but verify legal research. You'll always have to review the results of the review outputs that AI gives you and make decisions based on that. And you'll have to review the drafting and make your own drafting tweaks. It's not that action is being completely replaced. You're just doing it at a faster rate than you were on your own.
Yeah, thank you. That is a great point. And again, I want to be mindful of time. We have 15 minutes to go, and we wanted to leave some time for questions. So I apologize to everyone who's sending us questions right now that we're not hitting them all. Did you have any other comments on drafting? Okay. So I'd like to move next to build your own RAG for your practice, ? And talk about custom GPTs. There's 3 hyperlinks there that the first one is a custom GPT that I most recently created. I would put this within the legal review and report category of the 3 categories we've been talking about. And I've made that publicly available for anyone with a Chat GPT-4 subscription. You can go on there now and check it out. It's a state tax credit. I get this question all the time, both from investors and from startups that want to be qualified businesses for the qualified equity and subordinated debt state tax credit. And quite candidly, I am just sick of repeating myself. So if you're in that boat for your practice, consider making a custom GPT. And that's what Chris did. If you look at the third one, the trademark law AI assistant bot, someone just asked the question, do you need to know how to code? I don't know how to code at all. And I made the first mini RAG, if you will, custom GPT. I made it in an hour and maybe curated questions for another hour. And I was quite happy, quite pleased with that. So I even shared it publicly and I said, hey, everybody here on LinkedIn, I said, here's check it out. I made this internally for myself and I thought it was so good that you should check it out. So it is now publicly available, but the second one is probably something that might be more relevant for folks' respective practices on this Zoom meeting here. The second one is an internal one. It is private. So I also help create property owner association as well as condominium association regimes throughout Central Virginia. The Condominium Act, for anyone who knows it out there, is rife with just very particular Virginia code provisions, as well as Virginia administrative code provisions, forms. You have to work with the Common Interest Community Board out of Richmond. It's pretty cool stuff, but I get questions a lot in particular. And I think one of the impetus to create this custom GPT was I represent a condominium association and I take minutes during the meeting and, they ask me law questions about the Condominium Act while I'm trying to take minutes and I'm overwhelmed trying to do too many things at once. This custom GPT that I made, which I believe is accessible with private links. So if you have a 4.0 subscription, you can access it, but it's not publicly available on the custom GPT store. It was for my own internal use, and it's actually pretty good. I put POA, the Virginia code of POA, any administrative code, which isn't much. I put the Virginia code of the Condo Act, the Virginia administrative code of the Virginia Condo Act, plus some other internal materials that I've used over the years, like training things that I've kept. And I threw it all in there, and it's pretty good. It gets the POA and condo confused a little bit, so I think I'm going to make 2 separate ones for the future. But the idea is to save myself time. And if a client has a question about something, I can give them an answer more quickly, and I don't have to try to store it all in my brain or make the wrong opinion because I was in a rush trying to get to something else and I gave a breezy response, which I try not to do, but sometimes it can happen. So I think my point is internal custom GPTs are pretty cool for your own internal use. They don't have to be for the clients. The third one, and I'll let Chris talk about it. He made this trademark bot, which is one of Chris's particular areas of interest, is intellectual property. He made it because the prospective and actual clients who need trademark work keep asking him the same questions. So, Chris, do you want to talk about your bot for a second?
Yeah, I mean, on that specifically, it's essentially, and maybe it would be good to just take a pause and explain a little bit more about what custom GPTs are. I see we're having questions to that effect of what we're calling these mini RAGs.
Yeah.
First and foremost, to have it, you do need a ChatGPT Plus subscription. You need access to OpenAI's premium service. And essentially, it allows you to use GPT-4's function, but give it specific upfront instructions on how you want it to respond, what the purpose of its output should be, and then you can feed it. I think the size limitation is 10 documents, almost like a pseudo RAG, a mini RAG of I only want you to look within these 10 documents. You could instruct it to go beyond that and do things like web searching if it's not finding the result in what you fed it. But case in point, like a lot of clients, prospective trademark clients, have questions on trademark validity, and what's the trademark registration process with the USPTO? What's the substantive examination? Can I get this trademarked? So instead of being tired, like Justin was saying, of answering that question over and over again, I created a custom GPT that I just fed it the entirety of the trademark manual of examination procedure. And so read this, and I can ask you questions. I can give you an example mark and say, is this a valid trademark? Does this have a potential to be registered? What potential issues could arise? And it will immediately pop it out. I review it, check it again, trust but verify. I know the TMEP, and have the ability to pretty quickly review and verify its information. But if I agree with it and think it's good, in most cases, I can just send those results directly to the client. And it's just a way of resolving those issues much faster. Also, there's sometimes when I know something is in the TMEP, but I don't remember the exact word or exact section of what it's under. And this gives me an opportunity to have a much better functionality than a search bar or a Control F.
Yeah.
I can even vaguely describe a section saying, I think the TMEP addresses this, where is it? And it will immediately respond with the section that I can go to much faster than I would just poking around and trying to find it myself. And I mentioned these are mini RAGs. It is like, it doesn't require, you can do it with plain language. It doesn't require any coding experience. There are limitations in terms of size. RAGs are a little bit more powerful, but they are also a little bit more sophisticated. So like we are working with a software engineer for the RAG that we're building with the UR AI class. But I think a question referenced this. I really do see that as the future for all law firms, where they have their own closed loop secure RAG that's trained on their own existing documents. Because I can't tell you how many times we are faced with a situation, we're faced with terms of a contract we need to draft, and we know we drafted something like that years ago. That would be a perfect template for this situation, or maybe a combination of past documents that could be used as templates for this new matter. But for the life of us, we just can't remember for who and when we did it. An internal firm RAG could help produce that for us immediately, potentially even draft a starter template for us to go on. I really see as the future, rather than these incredibly large publicly available LLMs that are trained on everything under the sun, that is both can be good, but also can be bad and result in things like hallucinations.
Right. And one further thing to juxtapose those two items to is Lexis Plus AI and Westlaw Precision. Their AIs, from the best I can tell, they're giving it would be like starting from all the base docs they already have with an AI looped on top of it. I do believe that each of us offers something unique to our clientele based upon the years of practice and preferences, style, strategy that each of us has, that could be reflected in RAGs, that could be built upon for years and passed forward to the next generation of attorneys, versus everything staying in our heads as it's been all years prior to this. So that's what I see as the potential for the future. So I think that the main distinction between a custom GPT and a RAG is the 10 file upload limitation, which, Chris, at one point you had the issue and you just put a whole bunch of documents into one PDF, right? It was pretty sizable, right? It was a couple hundred pages.
More than that. So the TMEP for the trademark bot, there's 19 sections and some appendices, which would, of course, if I was to upload every single one as a separate document, would go over the document size limitation. I instead compiled everything into a PDF, and it was actually 1,500 pages long in total, which I was skeptical that it would be able to upload that, but it actually did take it as a single document that I could train the custom GPT on. The output was a little slowed down by that fact, but I mean, still faster than I could just searching around myself.
Yeah, and I think that Jay Rose, who sent us a question, offered an interesting counterpoint to this, which is, with the upload limitation, is it just easier for me to do it myself? There will be instances where it's easier still to do it as a human, and you just have to use your prior knowledge of, like, when something is going to be a heavy lift or something that is repeatable, that could have a greater layer of automation or give you trust or get you an answer later. Because I think that, like, I hear you on certain items you might be able to come back to and it'll be quicker. When I made the state tax credit chat GPT or custom GPT, I could have spent less time just doing it as a human, but I thought to myself, I'm creating this because I know I'm going to get asked this 10 more times this year, and I'm just going to go to this bot and it's going to save me net more time than having to refresh my memory every time, or potentially riff with a client and give them bad information because I don't recall it that well. So this can get you information closer to your fingertips, and really it's about aggregate speed. In some instances, maybe not individual speed. So for things that aren't really repeatable and it's not a lot of documentation, might not be the best for you. Although I do still like the solutions that AI provides for the staring into the abyss issue. So we have 3 minutes left. We've talked about RAGs, and I think future of practice of law. We've touched on the RAG, like what we think the future will be for law firms. Again, subject to change, like everything. But the one thing that I think is interesting is, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the California State Bar and the Florida State Bar are both advocating for support of AI. And I think one of their main points of advocacy is that it is net deflationary to consumers of our services. And I don't know if it was expressed, and Chris, maybe if you recall, maybe you could confirm, but both state bars hope that this helps lawyers move generally from a billable hour to a more of a flat fee type of model where billing is based more upon value than upon time. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, I think it was the Florida one that was a little more expressive of stating, like, both essentially made a call to action of we need to look into AI use by lawyers more, creating things like advisory boards to focus on this topic. I think in its proposal, Florida was the one that expressly said something that may need to be evaluated is moving to a flat fee rather than hourly structure, because we've talked about all the other ethical considerations. Another one is reasonable fees to a client. If you're doing something in a fraction of the time, does an hourly rate really make sense in that situation? It's just something state bars are looking at in addition to a variety of other considerations.
Yeah. Well, we have 1 minute to go, and maybe VBA will be so kind to give us some extra time to field any questions.
You were welcome to hang on for another 10 minutes, go through a few more questions if folks would like to stick around.
Do we just want to try to do a lightning round of down the list of questions we didn't hit on in the chat?
Yeah, I feel like
we could try to be quick about them. So Nathan asked about the reference to Prime in the written materials. That has to do with legal research, but just use of AI in general. Of priming is a term that's used in prompt engineering resources, of essentially saying provide as much context as you possibly can when you're trying to get the AI to do something. So you know it's looking in the right place. It's not getting distracted by other data. It's not making assumptions. It was the point of that part of the outline. Aaron was asking about specific AI tools. For time's sake, I won't go into like specific topics, but the main question of like sometimes some AIs claim that they don't store or learn from your inputs and whether that should be trusted. I would say best practice is just use the confidentiality mechanisms that we talked about, things like putting an engagement letter, getting client consent, redacting information. It's just safe practice. Like closed loop definitely gives greater assurances, but your due diligence would be doing the most you can to protect client sensitive information. How do you throw something into Claude was asked, but all these LLMs have little attachment icons, click, drag, upload. You could do even copy and paste. Yeah, there are ways to do that. Jonathan asked, this all sounds like a cost-effective substitute for certain paralegal duties. I do think to an extent that is true when you're thinking about those mundane tasks. The administrative task could be simplified. Drafting of emails could be getting a quick email out to clients could be a good use of AI. Though paralegals may not be fully replaced also, similar to how AI doesn't replace a lawyer, it just makes a lawyer much more productive and efficient. The same could be said for paralegals. They could be doing the same thing, again, with your supervision, but you could have a paralegal performing their duties at the rate of 5 or 10 paralegals were doing, that you just collectively are getting work product out the door faster. Talked about that.
Someone asks how to get started with building rags.
Yeah, that's the one I'm on.
I think anyone who's listening, feel free to reach out to us directly if you want any referrals to or folks like we know several folks that are actively building rags and have substantial experience in that field. But it's moving very quickly. So you know, I would say there'd be two that I think of right off the bat, but I'm probably not thinking of a few that could help build a rag. I mean, it's really as simple as and what we're building in our class is we're trying to build smart rags, which is just very targeted. You can also just throw in all your preferred materials, which I think could be helpful. One problem that I have is when you use an old form from a prior deal, there might be things in there that were unique to that deal that you don't want to replicate in the next one. You know, a rag could probably help with that if you give multiple instances of different iterations of the same thing. Say it's a membership interest purchase agreement or an asset purchase agreement. You know, you're giving it different ways to predict, which is ultimately still the same thing that it's doing. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us offline. We'd be happy to talk with y'all. Any other new questions? I appreciate the kind words from the folks who are probably leaving now. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Gentlemen, the reviews are good so far. So
thanks.
Thank you for coming in today, and thank you for providing all this great information. I know based on the poll, this may be the start of the conversation for a lot of people, but I doubt that it will be the end by any means. And we do really appreciate you coming in. Appreciate everybody who came and attended today. I was keeping an eye on attendance, and a lot of times you'll have fall off. People stayed. They wanted to hear what you guys were providing. So I would remind everybody to come on back next week for the second of our webinars this month. And this one is on using AI to manage your law firm. A lot of the talk has been about how to use AI for drafting or for legal research. This is for using it for other purposes in your firm. So such as drafting policies and doing non-legal research that I think may be overlooked. So that is why we chose that as the second of these programs, and look for more in the future. And again, Justin, Chris, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Hope everybody has a great afternoon.